we're going to go over how I like to do foundation and match the skin tone of the face, because the way I do it is a little bit more, you're going to start looking at it as more of an artist perspective and less of a consumer perspective. And I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so this is an example of a palette that has depotted cream foundations, and for the typical artist that's just starting, this is going to be more than enough colors. You really don't need this entire range. So I'll show you the range that I use, because even from a palette like this, you'll find yourself typically using the same probably 2 or 3 color tones on almost all of your clients. So what I do is I like to run everyone a little bit more of a yellow or a warm undertone, because I feel like that's the most common undertone. Also, people that have rosiness in their skin don't necessarily need more rosiness. They need something that's going to counteract the rosiness and warm up their skin and kind of color correct that rosy. Because if you put pink on top of pink, you just get more pink. And then people that are a yellowy undertone, so my model is a very yellow undertone. She's not super warm, but in the summertime she would be really warm. So she can kind of go either way. She's got kind of fair points to her face, but overall she looks better with a little bit of warmth in her skin, like I feel like everybody does. So I have removed from my palette the typical colors of foundation that I would buy in a certain line. So let's say you go to the store and you hear online what the newest, best foundation is. You don't need to go to the store and buy the entire range, because one, you'd spend tons of money and you're probably just starting out and building your kit, and that's not going to be realistic for you. Another reason is you don't need to do that, because with the help of understanding what colors to buy to start with, and then the help of a color corrective concealer palette, you can quickly color adjust your foundation if it's too light or too dark, and I'll show you how we do that as we go. I've also brought out a little bit of my favorite primer, and it's a yellow-based face primer, and I'm going to put that on her face first. Primers are going to be great for people that have any kind of like imperfection to their skin. If someone has perfect skin, they're not really going to need a primer, because primers are meant to act as kind of a filler to the skin. And Nina her skin is very good, but right now you can see a little bit of patchy dryness in here, and that will really help smooth the texture of the skin so that you get the best application and smoothest application of the makeup possible. And I'm using right now a stipple brush. So I love stipple brushes for skin application. Stipple brushes can be a range of sizes and shapes, but I like to use one that's a little bit smaller and kind of an egg shape. That's the best stipple brush shape in my book. You can also use beauty sponges and whatever exact, as an artist, you'll sort of come up with what your favorite thing to use is. But as you're starting, a stipple brush is great because of the taper of the brush. You have the little fibers that stick out at the top, and then the smaller fibers that kind of taper alongside it. So you get great skin-like application, because the skin has texture to it. No matter who it is, we want skin-like texture and not a painterly texture, because that will look really artificial. Take that primer on the eyes. And the yellow tone of this primer, like we were just talking about as far as yellows go, a yellow is going to be a great color corrective tone for any, coloration in the skin. Purpley tones it will cancel out. So dark circles, blemishes, things of that nature. I then like to just spritz them with a rose water. And this primes the skin. It's an additional priming method, because I am using a cream-based makeup, which is a little bit harder to blend, unless it's a really, really creamy, sort of like wet base. These are a little bit more waxy, for lack of a better term. They're a little bit hard to blend unless you have some moisture. So what I like to do is I buy not the lightest, but about the second lightest in a line of foundations, and then the middle or a mid-range deep from that same line. And if you have those two tones, you can easily color match almost anyone that you work on. So what I do is with my stipple brush, I'm going to take this lighter tone and start in the center of the face on the high points. So this will be applied to the high points first. And as you can see, it is a cream-based product, so it is removed onto a palette because you can't double dip, as we went over in sanitation. And with the stipple brush, as you can see, this is a stipple stroke. A stipple is pressing it as you blend into the skin, whereas a brush stroke is going to be like this. So we want a little bit of both, stipple and a circular blend, to really get the best foundation application. So again, going over and into the highlight zones, I always push the foundation into the brows because I hate that weird ring around the brow when people don't complete their foundation. You also want to be pushing this into the hairline. And if you're ever working on a job with a hairstylist, I like to suggest that makeup goes first, because then if you do get a little bit of makeup on the hairline, they can easily brush through it. But if the hair's already done, just carefully sweep it aside and then wipe it off with a makeup wipe if you need to afterwards. So our other high points right above the lip. So this is going to be the bow of the lip, or the Cupid's bow, and then right underneath the nostrils. This is another really important reason that your brushes always are clean. I'm actually going up inside of her nostrils because lots of people have redness from allergies in that area, or broken capillaries from damaged skin. And then right across the center of that chin. And it doesn't have to be perfect because, like I said, we are going to color adjust as we go. Okay, so now that the highlight points are pretty much applied, we're going to go in with the deeper, the medium deep tone, same brush, and apply this directly to her contour or shadow zone. So where the drop shadows of all of the high points will be, like we discussed in bone structure. So with any kind of stipple brush, I love a stipple brush because it holds on to the makeup inside of the brush so that you're not constantly reapplying makeup. And you want to be really careful, especially when using a cream or a liquid base foundation, not to over apply, because then you'll end up with sort of a wet mess. You can see that this is kind of wet and creamy right now, but I'm being really careful not to over apply it so that I don't end up with like a wet mess that I have to really blend out, like, you know, keep blending and buffing. So then we're going to find right under where that knob is of her cheekbone, where her correct hollow is. And once you find it, you can draw a line straight up back to about the knob of the ear into the hairline, and that's the correct application for that contour. And again, don't bring it down too far because we want it to maintain that structural element where it's shaping the face and not dragging the face down. We're going to go underneath the jawline, all of the shadow points. So we're just swirling it on real quickly, and we will blend it all together and color adjust as we go. So down the sides of the nose bridge. And into that well of the eye that leads to the crease, straight down where that top of the nostril starts to curve. That's about where you want it. Same on the other side. And you can feel with your brush for that hollow to really make sure that you find the correct placement for that. It's so, so important to find correct placement of that because it will make your makeup look just awful if it's too low. And I just blend it upward into that lighter foundation. And you'll start to see as we go this makeup warming up. And you'll start to see like, okay, yeah, now that's becoming her correct shade. And it's not overly light like it was at first when we just did the highlight zones when she was kind of ghosty. Same thing on the other side of the nostril, being really careful to apply it properly, straight down. And you don't want to come too far over with that side of the nose bridge contour either, because if this area starts to get dark, then it will look just overly shadowed. And that's a highlight zone, so we want to keep it light. And I'm dabbing just a little bit more of that light tone on her nose. And that warm color, the medium deep, kind of goes up the hairline. Again, I'm pressing it into the hairline. You can also make sure that makeup goes on ears. A strange thing, I know, but it's really important that makeup goes behind on the jawline and behind the ears, because especially with weddings, you'll get photographed from a lot of different angles, and it's frustrating if you see a picture of yourself where your makeup looks great in here and then it looks awful, you know, back here it's all light. All right, so now that we have that pretty much mapped out, it will look kind of patchy at first because we still have a lot of blending to do. So for the blend, I'm sizing up my stipple brush to one that's a little bit thicker. And this is so that I can just press in the makeup to set it a little bit more into the skin. And you can see there's like little bits of brush from the brush shedding. Totally normal for your brushes to shed this way. So I'm going to just kind of press this into the skin first, and then I'm going to go back to my smaller brush because this big one will kind of absorb some extra moisture on the face first so that we can go back and really blend everything together beautifully. But I'm just dabbing to kind of pick up too much, you know, the excess product so that you don't end up with a wet mess. So this brush that we used to apply the first two colors will now be used to blend, and we do not need to add more makeup to it. You want to in fact make sure that it doesn't have too much makeup on it, because you just want the fringiness of those fibers to swirl underneath the eyes. As you noticed, we did not apply makeup, any foundation, straight under here in the eye well. This is called the eye well. And you never want to apply foundation or concealer directly to that area. You always want to blend up to that area because it's just too much texture, and no matter what age someone is, they will have makeup fall in little fine lines and wrinkles around that area. Every age group has them. She's very young, and you can see that, you know, if it's too thick in those areas, she will have, you know, little creasy lines. So I'm just swirling all of that together, making sure not to leave any area of the face without makeup. So in here you want to just swirl that around, blending those two colors together, and you can see how that lighter tone and the deeper, warmer, kind of medium deep just marry together really beautifully to create her perfect color tone. And this is the way I always match people, because if you went to a makeup counter and you were just buying your own foundation, they will match your specific skin color. But as a makeup artist, like I said, you'll be buying your products as an artist and not a consumer. All right, so now we start our color adjusting process. When I look at this, once we have the light and the medium deep tone applied, I think it looks almost perfect for her. So we can go into just giving her a little bit extra spot concealing. And spot concealing is just when you go in and you spot conceal little discoloration areas and you don't over conceal. We want to always be careful not to overdo anything. So I am going to take my ring finger and warm up this yellowy concealer, and you can warm it up on the back of your hand, and I'm just going to dab this right along the top of that orbital bone, working it into that tear duct. And this is going to be an area of the face where most people have a little bit extra shadow or darkness to their eyes from being tired or not sleeping enough, which would be being tired. And so you just want to make sure to cover that base to make sure it's not too dark. So this is just an extra little spot conceal. The yellow base of the concealer I love a yellow base concealer because, like we talked about, yellow undertones just really cancels out any discoloration and brightens the skin, and it will do this with every skin tone, not just a warm olive skin tone. It will do it with someone who's fair, even if they're pink undertone and kind of more of a light skin. So just taking this here and there in the highlight points and blending it out. I'm kind of wiping my brush off on my arm to get any excess product off. And then I'm going to go and blend this up. Really, I'm far back on my brush so that I'm not applying much pressure. And this will give you a really light and beautiful blend. And then blending it up into the eye well. Like we discussed, you don't want to apply it directly to the eye well. And over that patchy area where she has some dry skin in here, you always want to stipple over any textural issues in the skin, because if you stroke over them, they will just kind of slip over the skin and they won't cover. Another reason that stippling is so important, because you're pressing it into the skin instead of wiping it. You can go all the way up to that bottom lash line, over the cheekbone. Just blend those areas. Okay, open. All right, so now that we have that done, I'm going to set her with some loose powder. So when I powder someone, I like to use a smaller blush brush so that I can really selectively powder. And as you can see, I'm just kind of, this brush is shedding really bad. I'm going to switch it up. Sometimes your brushes will shed more than others. So this just gets pressed into the skin. So I kind of dust off my brush and I press the powder where I'd like it to set the makeup. And you're going to want powder to go in any area that another powder product will be used, because powder adheres to powder. So for example, when we go into a powder contour and our blush and kind of pinker tones on the apples of the cheeks in a moment, we're going to want to make sure, since they are a powder product, they have a powder product to adhere to. Otherwise, they will absorb the most oily parts of the face, which will give you a really patchy look. So in other words, if we applied blush straight to her face after doing the makeup, it would just absorb the oil. So you'd get like patchy pink tones, which would look very strange. So I powder through the T-zone and anywhere that has the most moisture. And this particular powder has a bit of reflection to it, which I love. It's a nicely ground kind of photochromatic pigment. And a photochromatic pigment is just a pigment that is meant for photographs, so the highlight's not too chunky and it won't catch lens flare.